So a deep dive into guesstimates. So as we have covered, guesstimates can be of different types. Guesstimates can be standalone. They can be part of market sizing. And the market entry case that we'll do today will have a market sizing component to it. Okay. We'll not go through the entire example, but we'll see that it is an integral part of that case. How do we approach the solution? There can be three things. They can be products which are consumed at a household level. Then, so if let's say I have to calculate number of smartphones in the country, I will not do a household approach. But if I have to calculate number of refrigerators in the country, then probably a household approach will make more sense. For the smartphone kind of a product, which is consumed at an individual level, I might possibly want to go through a population approach. Okay. So you really want to know what your unit of measurement is at the end of the day. What is the level of consumption, or what is the level at which consumption happens, household or a population. The third thing really the structural approach or the bottleneck approach. Okay, that is just to say that there are situations when something has a physical capacity to it. Okay, so if you look at the YouTube page, there are a couple of examples for this. One is about Rajiv Chowk metro station. The second is about number of flights I can take off from Delhi airport. And if I take the number of flight example, so if let's say the problem is that I have to estimate the number of flights that can fly out of Delhi airport in a day. Now, what's the answer? Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? I don't know when I begin the problem solving process. But what I know is that the infrastructure puts in definitely a theoretical maximum capacity. There are really a limited number of people, that there's a limited number of flights that can possibly fly out of Delhi because the infrastructure is limited. Okay. And the bottleneck approach really is trying to estimate what is that, where, at which point do we really have a bottleneck. Like in the case of the airport, we might have runways as a bottleneck. That in the end, the flights have to take off from the runway. The runways are limited. So, and a runway will have a physical capacity. So let us say we have one runway only for illustration purposes. And it takes for every flight, theoretically every flight has to have, let's say, a 10-minute gap between two flights before they can fly off. This would be possibly smaller, but let's say it's 10 minutes. So we know that there are 1440 minutes in a day. Divided by 10, 144. So per runway, if the gap between two flights cannot be lower than 10 minutes, then theoretically no more than 144 flights per day can fly out of that runway, irrespective of what we do. Okay. So that's really the bottleneck approach. You can see those two examples in detail, and you will get a very clear sense of how do you really start thinking about this. Okay. Now, given we have already seen guesstimates in different examples, let's just quickly see that have we really applied these principles or not. Clarifying the scope of the problem, we really start with this point. Then we think of an alternative, supply and demand. Think of the ATM case. Okay. So which one really will give me the optimal solution, which will have least number of assumptions? And whatever assumptions that I end up making, my job really is to confirm those assumptions. And if the interviewer is not satisfied with an answer, then I have to perhaps re-assume something else. Okay. Then in some cases, you might have to find a bottleneck, like I just described in the airport case. Okay. And you can have enough examples of that. I mean, most physical, when I'm talking physical infrastructure, there has to be a practical capacity to it. If I talk about, let's say, campuses, okay, 1 million people might want to be part of a campus, but the campus has a limited capacity. So that's true for railway stations, that's true for restaurants, that's true for your airports, that's true for your metro stations. So whenever you have to estimate something, the first step typically is to figure out the practical capacity And then there's some steps that you will follow, which you can look at in those examples in some detail. The next point is about solving without a mess. So you might remember in the sheet alignment, I talk about keeping numbers separate. Then at another point, I have said that, lay out your structure and then fill in the numbers. So lay out structure first. Essentially, these are the two things I'm talking about when I'm saying that let's solve without a mess, so that because guesstimates involve far more number work than some of the other types of cases. So make sure your analysis is clean. And the last thing would be order of magnitude check. Okay. Let's take the same example that we did last time of 144 flights. Now, 144 flights out of one runway intuitively makes sense to me. If this answer was 14 or 1400, I might be slightly skeptical. Okay. So having a good order of magnitude check, or let's say 14,000, then definitely I know that what we're talking about is like a flight with 1/10 of a minute. That's probably practically impossible. So order of magnitude check helps. Okay. Let's say I'm taking, and it's really, I think someone had mentioned in one of the earlier sessions, how do we check our numbers? This is how we check our numbers at every point of time. When we are talking about a supply versus demand, okay, you might use one approach to actually get to that number. What you can do is you can use the other approach to quickly get to an answer and see whether the number intuitively or from an order of magnitude value makes sense. Let me take another example. Let's say you're trying to estimate the number of alcohol consumers in the country. Yeah. So 1.3 billion people. If I say the answer is 1 billion, the number intuitively does not make any sense. And if I say the number is 10 million, again, from an order of magnitude perspective, something which is less than 1% of the population, again, will not make sense to me. So this really is, so you know that if you do your calculations, if you hit 10 million, then clearly you have made some calculation error somewhere or an assumption error somewhere. So it helps to have a sense of your numbers without just, you don't just say whatever comes to you immediately. Now, this again is something we have talked about, especially in the WhatsApp case, that whenever you have to zero in on something, these are the 4 filters really you will end up using. So take the case of refrigerators. You will probably use these filters. So rural, urban will come into the picture. At that point of time, gender and age might not be will not be relevant, but the income split will be. If we talk about products which are consumed at an individual level, so if I talk about smoking cigarettes, so and specifically I talk about cigarettes. Okay, so there clearly the urban and rural differences will matter, because you will assume that rural markets have different consumption patterns of tobacco products. Gender split will matter, age split will matter quite a bit, and then again income split will matter, because you might have different preferences, different types of tobacco product at different income levels. Okay, so just remember that these 4 filters really help you, and I use all 4 every single time. Before I decided a couple of them might not be relevant, so I bring all 4 to the 4, and then I might quickly realize that these obviously cannot apply. And always remember that when you're applying these filters, if my population is 1.3 billion and I have to break it to 30%, let us say, so while the answer is 300 million, please always make it 400 million. Make your life simple as much as you can, because your errors when you round up or round down are going to be non-additive. So there are few more points to discuss when you're talking about guesstimates, and really the pointers. And I think we've briefly touched upon all of them already, but it's good to just recap them here. The first is around the setting. So we already discussed that different products might be solved through the household approach, through the individual approach, to the bottleneck approach. And for the bottleneck, you can really check out the Rajiv Chalk example that is there on the YouTube page, which is fairly expansive when it comes to this kind of problem. And we've discussed that there are certain products which can be individual level, certain products can be at household level. temporal uniformity assumption makes your life very, very simple. If instead of assuming, variations over a weekday or a weekend, it might be difficult for you to scale up things that way. If let's say I have to solve something for a month, I cannot do two different analysis for a weekday or a weekend. I can just assume that all 30 days look similar and just solve it for one of the days. Okay. So it makes your life simple if you can assume that. But it also is important that you highlight that you know that there is a variation which you have consciously decided to ignore, and not that you don't even acknowledge that there is no variation when it comes to demand change patterns across time. The next thing is about TU analysis. Knowing for how much time are you solving, that's not clearly spelled out in the question. And then sometimes it's useful to know in which unit you should solve your analysis, and that gives you a more useful lens to solve the problem. Let's say if I'm trying to figure out how much retail construction, let's say basically for individuals to live, how much construction of that form happened in Delhi last year. Okay. So I'll do all my scoping and all, but I will need to know, do I submit my final answer in number of flats or maybe in square feet of construction? One of them might be easier to estimate than the other, okay, depending upon the strategy that you adopt. So having a unit of your final answer clearly spelled out might be helpful. We've already discussed the usage of the 4 filters. Then it's about lifetime of the product and the replacement frequency. So for many products, like let's say a refrigerator or a mobile phone, the demand for a particular year is composed of 2 things: first time users and people who are basically replacing the same product after its useful life is done. So knowing the replacement frequency is useful. Typically you can use it as 1 over the useful life. So if you find out that, so the way this works is, let's say there are 10,000 units existing right now, and you have to replace, and the life is 10 years. So the assumption there is that 1,000 units get replaced every year. You will make that kind of an assumption. Okay. In many ways, when we are looking at population also, we kind of make this same inhuman way of estimating. How do I know how many people are there per year Indian population block? I mean, we know India is a young country, and populations are typically different. Graph that there are unequal people at different areas. But if you have to estimate the number of people in, let's say, the 18 to 32 age group, how do you do it very quickly? It's going to be extremely difficult. So just building on this logic, what you can do is you can assume there are 1.3 billion people in the country. So that's 1,300 million people. And you can assume the average life expectancy is 65. So in many ways, what you can assume that there are 20 million people who are dying every year, who are being born every year, assuming this population is constant. And that way you just simply have to do, okay, if we are introducing like a 14-year gap from 18 to 32. So the total number of people in this gap will be 14 into 20, it's a 280 million. Now, if you want to use, okay, fine, India is a younger country, okay, fine, let's make it 300 million, 350 million, that's okay. But you already have a very quick strategy to get to this number. Okay. The peak time analysis is what I was talking about. I try to solve the problem for the capacity when demand is matching the supply, because that can turn into an equation where there is only one unknown. Very similar to what we were doing in the ATM example. Okay, that an equation was formed, and in the Rajiv Chowk example. So doing it for the peak time analysis and then assuming a fraction of the peak time usage for other times is pretty useful. Then the last part is about occupancy rate. Like in different examples, I'm not very comfortable assuming that everything is being 100% of the time. In many ways, when I'm doing the peak time analysis and let's say I'm assuming that an item is used, or let's say a road is used 100% of the time at certain point of time, and then at low frequency it's being used only 20%. What I'm doing is implicitly giving it an occupancy rate. With buses, with flights, with any kind of thing, it's unlikely you will assume that at all points of time 100% of the capacity is used. So it's a good idea to just put in like a 80 or a 70 or a 90% number if you have some logic for it. So just keep that in mind. And the last thing is about troubleshooting representative sampling. So in one of the examples when I was doing that, how do I estimate the income of a group? How much is being spent by card holders in Delhi? So I said, well, I belong to that group. Whatever my spendings are going to be similar to what anyone in this group would be doing. So I was representative of the sample, and that's why I could just quickly come up with a number. I didn't have to build a ground up analysis. This could be done separately as well. Like say another example, if you have to, let's say, assume that like 10 seconds to estimate how many cigarette smokers are there in the country. Now, two types of problems, 18 to 30 group, which I belong to, and let's say all India. Now, what I would do is, let's say I figure out the number of people that I know. Now, given my age, I know more, perhaps I know more people in this group. So I assume that, okay, fine. In my group, that's 1 in 10 people that I know in this age group, or my, let's say overall in this age group, 18 to 30 that I know, 1 in 10 people smoke. I might now say that I think this is, my group is not very representative because all my friends, let's say, are urban, are a lot of them are disproportionately male. It's not 50-50 in terms of population. So it is possible that this number is not, so my sample clearly is not representative. So I might have to adjust this number. Whether I adjust it to 1.5 or 0.8 would really depend upon, or 2 or something of that. So it will really depend upon the number of factors I include, which show how far my deviation is from the average, and take into account that. Similarly, I could do it for all India. Now, if I say that I am only using my 18 to 30 sample to estimate for all India, then clearly I'm being extremely unrepresentative. So 1 by 10 definitely will not be an answer. So you could say, but this age group is the one which smokes the most. So if I'm doing it for an all India perspective, maybe it should be 0.8, but then there's less prevalence of smoking in my group. So maybe this should be 1.5. So you use some factor to increase, some factor to decrease. That's the adjustment part of it. The approach matters, and the kind of reasoning you will have will matter, not the final number so much. And the last part about guesstimates is really thoughts on numbers. We've already covered quite a bit of it, but let's still just wrap it up. So I think I've discussed that mental math is not so important. What is more important is you take your time, but get it right the first time. Use pen and paper. Of course, if you are very slow, you might be, some points might be docked if the interviewer is expecting a higher degree of comfort with numbers. But you can easily, it's not a make or break if you get the numbers right, and you can, really score that points back by being just slightly better in your communication, slightly better in your structuring. So you don't have to, and a lot of cases don't even have numbers in them. Like they just end up being qualitative analysis of what are the factors you will consider, because they want to understand your thinking process more than, just how much of how fast you are in terms of math. So don't worry about this aspect too much. Focus on getting it right. One aspect of getting it right also is that if your numbers don't mess up, it's unlikely that you will make a error. So make sure you do your calculations in a separate area to the extent possible. So keep it clean. And as I've discussed over and over again and done, I think you've seen that while I'm solving that, I first lay out the entire structure, the entire formula, the entire framework, and then I put in numbers. So that helps, because then I am in my number mindset and my non-number mindset. Okay, that's the kind of way I think, and I think it's a pretty useful way of not making mistakes. But perhaps really the two most powerful point on this slide and really about numbers are powers and zero error. Zero errors are when you have to write 6 zeros and you may end up only writing 5 zeros or 7 zeros. It happens more often than you would like to think. The best way to get out of this is using power notations. Just write million as 10 to the power 6. I've shown this in some of the examples. It makes calculation much simpler and less difficult, and also like it helps me avoid make a lot of errors. So the power notation helps. And precise versus good enough. There have been instances, a couple of them, when an interviewer asked me to be very precise. But every time I start by assuming, by either round up or round down, and they end up being non-additive errors, because some numbers I'll round up, some I'll round down. Then if the interviewer really asks for a precise number, then you might have to go back to your paper and do those calculations. But otherwise, being good enough is good enough most of the times. Okay. So I hope that the discussion on guesstimates has been helpful and has complemented the discussion we have had through the examples that we have discussed and has been helpful.